In the 90s, Mike Tyson was the most feared man alive. But when Royce Gracie challenged him to a no-rules death match, Tyson said no. Why? This isn't just a fight that didn't happen. It's a fight that could have changed combat sports forever. At the height of his dominance, Mike Tyson was feared like a mythological creature, the youngest heavyweight champion ever, knocking out men with the kind of power that made crowds gasp. But while Tyson ruled the boxing world, a revolution was bubbling underground, one led by the Gracie family. In Brazil and eventually in the U.S., the Gracies were proving that pure technique could defeat raw power. Royce Gracie, slender and unassuming, was walking through fighters of every discipline, boxers, wrestlers, karate masters, tapping them out with jiu-jitsu and brutal, no-rules events. Royce, along with his brother Rickson, had their eyes on the ultimate prize, Mike Tyson, but not in a boxing ring. They wanted a real fight, no gloves, no rounds, no rules. A veiled tudo, anything goes match. And they weren't just calling him out for the clout. They were on a mission to prove that being the best boxer didn't make you the best fighter. According to sports writer Fayez Rafiq in his memoir, To the Top, Royce formally challenged Tyson in the early 90s, tried to drag him into the Octagon, or even a custom fight outside of any promotion. Royce's words were chilling. There's only one way to find out. He said it with a smirk and a laugh. But the challenge was real. And Mike Tyson, the baddest man on the planet, reportedly refused. Not out of fear, but out of respect for what he couldn't control. Tyson told Confidants he couldn't win that kind of fight. He understood. In a no-rules match, once Royce took him to the ground, it would be over. There would be no canvas to dance on, no ropes to lean against. Just an anaconda and a GI, wrapping him up and choking him out. This wasn't a boxing match. It was a trap for the unprepared, and Tyson, despite his ego, was smart enough to know it. That moment, that single refused challenge, became the ultimate what-if in fight history. Could Tyson's rage overcome Royce's calm? Or would the king of knockouts tap out to a man half his size? We'll never know, because Tyson never stepped into Royce's world. If you're into the real stories behind the fights that almost happened, hit that subscribe button. We dive into forgotten challenges, near fights, and what-ifs every week here on MMA Thread. In the early 1990s, boxing was still king. Pay-per-view numbers were strong, arenas were packed, and heavyweight champions were cultural icons. Mike Tyson was the face of all of it, a one-man wrecking crew who generated millions every time he stepped into the ring. But somewhere outside the limelight, a new threat to boxing's throne was forming: mixed martial arts. It wasn't polished. It wasn't even legal in many states. It was raw, dangerous, and unfiltered. The first UFC event in 1993 looked more like a gladiator pit than a sports competition. No gloves, no weight classes, and no time limits. And it was perfect for the Gracies, who wanted to prove that technique beats toughness. So when Royce Gracie started calling out Mike Tyson, people listened. But not everyone was excited. Tyson's team, the lawyers, the managers, the promoters, even the boxing commissions, immediately saw red flags. A loss in this kind of environment wouldn't just hurt Tyson. It could shatter boxing's entire aura of superiority. Think about it. If the most feared boxer on earth tapped out in a minute to a 180-pound jiu-jitsu guy in pajamas, what message would that send? That boxing was incomplete? That Tyson's reign only existed in a limited rules set? For the billion-dollar boxing industry, that was unacceptable. Even if Tyson was curious about MMA, the people around him shut it down. They told him, "You're not just a fighter, you're a business." And business couldn't risk being embarrassed by a style that most Americans didn't even understand yet. The truth is, MMA needed Tyson, his name, his stardom, his violence. But boxing needed to protect him, and the safest way to do that was to keep him away from the cage. This wasn't just a misfight. It was a chess move to protect the throne. And the people in power made sure the king stayed in his ring. Here's the twist most fans don't know. Mike Tyson did want to fight in MMA. This wasn't just fantasy matchmaking behind closed doors. Tyson was curious, intrigued, even excited about stepping into the cage. Years after the original challenge, Royce Gracie dropped a bombshell. He revealed that Tyson had verbally accepted the idea of fighting under MMA-style rules. No ropes, no 10 count. Just two men and one truth. I talked him before, Royce said. He's like, I'd love to try this stuff out, man. Tyson wasn't scared. He was fascinated. As brutal and chaotic as the early UFC seemed, it stirred something in him. Maybe it was the street-fighting instincts from his Brooklyn roots. Maybe it was the primal challenge. Maybe he wanted to see who he really was when gloves and rules were stripped away. But just as quickly as he leaned in, the door slammed shut again. His lawyers said absolutely not. His promoters? Too much risk. The athletic commissions? No chance. Tyson was more than a fighter. He was a product, a brand, and an empire. A single submission loss to Royce Gracie could wipe out not just his mystique, but the myth of boxing supremacy. So, despite the fact that Tyson verbally agreed to step into MMA, he was blocked by his own inner circle. Every time the idea resurfaced, the people who managed his career pulled the plug. He had accepted, Royce said, but the people around him did not allow him to do it. This wasn't a man dodging a fight. It was a fighter being chained down by the politics of prize fighting. And for fans, it became one of the greatest what could have been moments in combat sports history. Just as the Tyson versus Gracie super fight buzz was building, everything came to a crashing halt. In 1992, Mike Tyson was convicted of rape and sentenced to 6 years in prison. He served 3. And during those critical years, while he was behind bars, MMA exploded into existence. UFC 1 debuted in 1993. Royce Gracie choked out 3 men in one night, shocking the world and changing the fight game forever. He wasn't just winning, he was dismantling giants, karate champions, boxers, wrestlers. Royce didn't just introduce Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to America, he redefined what it meant to be a real fighter. Meanwhile, Tyson was in a prison cell, watching it all from the sidelines. And just like that, the fight everyone wanted, the ultimate clash of violence versus technique, power versus precision, was lost to time. When Tyson was released in 1995, he was laser-focused on reclaiming his boxing throne. He blew through the heavyweight division once again, recapturing the WBC and WBA titles. He was back, but MMA had already moved on. The timing couldn't have been worse. By the time Royce reached out again in 1997, the heat of that first, pure challenge was gone. The world had changed. Tyson was older and now surrounded by even more business interests. His brand, his endorsements, his return to the ring, all of it would have been jeopardized by a crossover loss. The prison sentence didn't just pause Tyson's career. It killed the only real window where a no-holds-barred fight against Royce Gracie could have happened. It was like a movie script that stopped at Act 2. The ultimate fight was already written, but never filmed. Mike Tyson was a wrecking ball, the most explosive puncher the sport had ever seen. He didn't just knock people out, he deleted them. But all that fearsome power came with one glaring weakness, one that the Gracies were counting on. He had no ground game. In boxing, Tyson was untouchable. His footwork, head movement, and peekaboo style made him a nightmare to close in on. But in MMA, none of that mattered once the fight hit the ground. Royce Gracie wasn't going to trade punches. He wasn't going to brawl. He was going to survive the storm, shoot for Tyson's legs, and drag him into the depths of jiu-jitsu, where Tyson would be helpless. It's not an insult. It's just fact. Tyson never trained in wrestling, grappling, or submissions. He didn't need to. He was a boxer, through and through. But that's exactly why the people around him kept him out of MMA. The minute he hit the mat, the fight was over. Fans loved to speculate. What if Tyson learned takedown defense? What if he caught Royce coming in? Sure, anything's possible. One punch from Tyson could still shut off the lights. But the truth is, in a real MMA setting, he was outgunned technically. Royce had already submitted Olympic wrestlers and strikers twice Tyson's size. He wouldn't have stood and banged. He'd have wrapped Tyson up like a python with a fresh kill. Even Tyson himself, later in life, admitted he'd have needed to start from scratch to compete in MMA. He respected it. He trained with guys like Francis Ngannou. He wanted to try it. But without years of grappling, he never stood a true chance against someone like Royce. So in the end, the reason Tyson never stepped into MMA wasn't fear. It was self-awareness. Even the baddest man on the planet knew that his fists weren't enough in a fight without rules. And that's what makes this story legendary. Because sometimes the fight that doesn't happen tells us more than the ones that do. Tyson versus Gracie never happened. But if it did, who would have won? Let us know in the comments. And don't miss our next breakdown, the time a street fighter almost made it to the UFC. Hit like, subscribe, and keep the thread alive, only on MMA Thread.